Before I go further, I wanted to take a moment real quickly to say thanks to everyone who made a contribution to help our kids be able to go to camp this summer. Thanks to you, we were able to raise about $400 per student to help them to be able to go to camp. And I wanted to say this as well. So we've added one more. So if you like, man, I want to make sure that, this one needs a lot more help in going to camp. And so if you want to make a donation on behalf and being able to help that person go to camp, I would love you to be able to do that. We'll appreciate that and everything as well. But so excited. I think it's a life-changing experience, and it will be for them. And so thanks for all of you that wanted to help us be able to create that in the lives of the kids that we're going to be able to take to camp. So with that in mind, as we're wrapping up this series, hopefully there's been a theme that you've been able to recognize and be able to see. Hopefully you've been able to see how much God loves us, how much Jesus loves us. And the more that we begin to understand that love, hopefully that allows us to begin to reflect that love and people be able to begin to see that love in us. And it's really interesting, as I was thinking about this service today, our message today, I kind of went down a rabbit hole. I kind of did. And I started thinking, like, what are some songs that maybe not the lyrics of the song themselves, but at least the title of their songs can have, like, theological implications. So these are the kind of things I'm kind of, going through as I'm distracted in Starbucks, looking at my cafe, my chai tea latte. But with that in mind, for example, in 1976, Stevie Wonder wrote a song called "Love is in Need of Love Today," and I thought, oh, that's a good one. Or in the 1960s, the Righteous Brothers had one. Remember that one? You lost that. That's right, that love and feeling. That's right. If you watched Top Gun, you know exactly what we're talking about. 2003, the Black Eyed Peas asked us an important message. They said, Where is the love? That's right. And I was going to rap some of it for you guys, but I decided I'm not gonna do that because I don't want to unleash, like, Millennium's looking at me, my son, and he might be jealous of, the way that I spit, as the kids might say, and bring out my rhymes. So I'm just going to continue to move forward. And then in 1984, Tina Turner asked us, "What's love?" That's right, got to do with it. And then in the 60s, the Beatles made a statement. Well, they had a song, and I thought, you know what? That is going to be my sermon title for this week. And it was, "All you need is," da, 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 right? Yeah, thanks, Leah. See, I'm not alone. So, all you need is love. That's the title of today's message. And I thought, that is a great way to wrap up the series that we've been doing on who is Jesus, is to look at love. Why? Because let's look at what Jesus said in John chapter 13, verse 34 and 35. He says, "So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Your love for one another will what? Will prove to the world that you are my disciples." Your love will prove to the world that you are my disciples. So again, the question that we've been looking at is, who is Jesus? And there's been a driving question that we've had throughout this series. You can see right on the screen. That driving question is simply this, is, do you know about Jesus, or do you know Jesus? Do you know about Jesus, or do you know Jesus? And if we're talking about looking at love, then it would make sense. Like, if you know about Jesus, you know about his love, it's a beginning. But if you know Jesus, like you know his love, and that love really begins to permeate you. It's one thing to know about Jesus. It's another thing to know about Jesus. It's one thing to know about his love. It's another thing to know about his love. And the more that we know about his love, the more that it fills us, the more that it changes our lives, the more that it ultimately draws us to him and also encourages us to be able to love others as well. And here's the thing that I found is when you are around people that you love, hopefully they will influence you in some way. you know, no doubt, for example, if you marry someone, no doubt your husband or wife will have strengths that you do not have. They will also have weaknesses that you do not have. But I can tell you, like, the areas where Heidi is strong also are areas where I am weak. And sometimes those areas are called arguments, right? Right? But I do have a choice. I can either fight those areas or I can learn from those areas. And the thing is when we know Jesus, that love that exposes our weaknesses, we have an opportunity to be able to grow in him. That's why it tells us in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, it starts out straight off the bat, imitate God. Right off the bat, imitate God. Therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children, live a life filled with love, that's right. Following the example of Christ, he loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God. Now, a lot of people look at the sacrifice was a pleasing aroma to God. And I think it was in some ways. But I think the real pleasing aroma to God was his love. Because it was his love that drove him to make the sacrifice. No love, no sacrifice. I mean, flat out. So if we are committed to living his love in us and having that love fill our lives, and ultimately what that love will do is we will begin to see that our lives will become a sweet fragrance to God. And have you noticed, like, there's certain places, I love when I walk in the house and Heidi has cooked. Like, you walk in and you smell that fragrance and you know something good is going to happen. I've also been blessed when I've attempted to cook, you know, and Heidi will walk in and she'll go, oh, that smells good. I'm like, oh, thank you, Jesus. You know? But there's something about that. And we all know it. Like, when you walk into a room and you smell something fragrant, doesn't it? Like, oh, it kind of like lifts the room. Or when you go visit, like when you would go visit your mom and you walk in and you smelled it and you knew your mom was making your favorite dish. You knew it. And so it's kind of like that way, that love that we have in our lives, it's a sweet fragrance to God, but I think also it's a sweet fragrance to those that are around us as well. It becomes that aroma. And so it's important for us to understand this, and this is something that I've hit, and I want to hit this again for the rest of this message, and that simply is this, so you can see this again. Christianity is not about practicing good behavior. Let me say it again. Christianity is not about practicing good behavior. Jesus was not interested in finding good people. He was not interested in making good people. Matter of fact, he even says that, right? He says, again, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not perform any miracles in your name? Did we not cast out demons? Did we not perform like the goody, good in your name? And he will say, depart from me, for I never knew you. So he's not looking for good. He's looking for something different. And I think if we begin to understand that, it changes. And here's the reason why he's not looking for good. And we can see that when we look at the religious leaders, or the religious people of Jesus' time. Because these were people that practiced good. They practiced good so good that it made our good look a shame. I mean, these are people that practice good. But yet, here's what Jesus says to them. For example, in Matthew chapter 23, verse 23, he says, what sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens. But you ignore the most important aspects of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. So, I mean, think about this. He's talking about this idea of tithe. So the idea of a tithe is that you would take 10% of your income, of whatever it is, and you would give it back to God. And so here at Encounter, we really don't talk about tithing a lot, but what I would encourage us to do is just look at how can I be generous towards God in my relationship with him. But with this in mind, it says what these guys would do is they would tithe a tenth basically off of the income from their herb garden. So I want to give you a picture of that. So I went on Amazon this week, and I just looked up, I went to Amazon Fresh, and I just looked at the cost of parsley. Right? The cost of parsley, herb garden. So the cost of parsley was 99 cents that day. So that means that if they earned 99 cents, then that means they would tithe back what? 9.9 cents, or if they were a good believer, a dime, right? They would give that back. Now, here's the reality. They probably didn't clear 99 cents, right? So they probably, let's say they cleared 50 cents. Then that means that they would get, so these guys were committed. I got to give God back my nickel. They were committed to that. But Jesus says, look, that's great that you do that, but you're missing justice, mercy, and faith. In other words, you're missing the most important elements. And see, that's the thing about good, is good looks good. It does. But the problem is sometimes good can mask the fact that we're not focusing on the things that really matter. At the end of the day, we're not focusing on the things that really, truly count. So Jesus goes on and he says this in Matthew chapter 23. He says, "What sorrow awaits you teachers of religious law and you Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy, full of greed and self-indulgence." I mean, so think about what Jesus is saying here. On the outside, y'all look good. Y'all look good. You know, Tressa complimented me this morning because I got the orange, matching the orange shoes. You know, I'm pulling the outfit together. And again, I give my wife credit for that. Thank you, love. You know, in that way. But on the outside, religious people look really good on the outside. They look really good, right? They pray on a regular basis. They go to church on a regular basis. Maybe they even volunteer in a neighborhood or a community on a regular basis. They're doing some really great things. But it says, but they were full of self-indulgence and greed. So you know what that means is, and this is what's really important, this is why Jesus is not looking for good people. Because the reality is, we may look good on the outside, but still be a mess on the inside. And here's what I've also found, is I have found that there are people who stop doing their bad things, but the mindset that they had when they were doing their bad things never changed. So what happens with that, and that's what was happening with these guys, is on the outside, they were good, but they were self-indulgent and they were greedy. In other words, they were still finding ways to take advantage of the people of that time. They were still manipulative. They were still controlling. I mean, think about this. I mean, think of the goody-goodies, right? Those were the goody-goodies of that time. The goody-goodies of that time looked at Jesus. Now, Jesus, who is like the ultimate good, right? The ultimate perfection. They looked at Jesus and they said, not good enough. Did you catch that? The religious leaders of that time, the goody-gooders, looked at Jesus and said, not good enough. See, and I've seen it. We've seen it today where there are people who are good, practice the good. But they're also hypocritical, judgmental, hypercritical. And also, they have some mess somewhere in their lives, but they kind of hide that by trying to be good. And I've also found that the people who are the most judgmental tend to be people who focus on their good parts while building your bad parts so they feel good about themselves. But Jesus is saying, look, on the outside you look good, but inside you're a mess. So he goes on and he says this in verse 26. You blind Pharisees, first wash the what? Wash the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will become clean too. You know, there have been times where I'll pull something out of the dishwasher, and on the outside it looks really clean. It's even maybe dripping a little water, but then somehow maybe it wasn't rinsed out. It's good. So then you pull it out of the dishwasher and you look inside, and it's a mess on the inside. And you're like, ooh, I'm not drinking out of that, right? It's still a mess on the inside. And so it's kind of that same way, is we may look good on the outside, but Jesus doesn't care about our outside. He doesn't care about our outside. It's what's inside that counts. And so here's the thing about being good, is being good looks good outwardly, but it changes nothing inwardly. Doesn't make us a better person, doesn't make us more kind, doesn't make us more gracious, doesn't make us more patient, doesn't make us more merciful, doesn't make us more faithful. It changes nothing internally, although outwardly we look good. We look good, and we feel good about ourselves. And so that's the challenge. So that's why it's important. So what Jesus does is he gives this incredible advice, which is really simple. First, clean the inside of the cup, and then the outside will be clean. Clean your heart, and the outside will be clean. If you ever started to work out, when you go to the gym and you get a trainer, one of the first things your trainer will do is not necessarily work on your arms or your legs, although those are important. The most important thing that a trainer will do is work on what they would call your core. It will strengthen your core. So what I decided to do is, you know me, so I went on Google and I said, why do we need a strong core? And Google AI said this, so I thought this was really great. You can see it's right on the screen. Google AI said, strong core muscles are important because they provide stability, support, and balance for the entire body. Strength, support, and balance for the entire body. And so as we're looking at this then, what God wants us to do is to work on our core, to strengthen our spiritual core muscles. And as a result of that, what it would do is it would begin to change the outside of who we are. So then the question becomes, well, where do our core muscles get their weaknesses from? Like where does the flabbiness of our core muscles kick in? The weakness, what does that kick in at? And so there's this one point where it's important, because when we begin to understand that, we can begin to dig into that and begin to find. So if that being the case, then what advice did Jesus give to help us to be able to strengthen our core muscles? What advice did he give? And that's really the core of our church. Mark 12:30 and 31. Mark 12:30, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. Verse 31, you get again, this is sequentially, the second is sequentially. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. So that's the spiritual core. Love God, love others, love yourself. That's the spiritual core. And that's why we hit that every week here at Encounter, because that's what I'm hoping to build in our lives. And for us to begin to recognize that it's more than just about being good. I became a Christian in 1989. Is when I became a Christian, 1989. And Jacob's looking at me like, 89? Like, did books exist back then? 1989 is when I became a Christian. And I will say from 1989 until 2022, I lived under the guise of being good. I thought being good was because that's what I was always taught, right? That's what I was always taught, and you guys have heard it, like, the gooder we are at being good, the closer we are to Jesus. Isn't that how we've been taught? The better we are at being good, the closer we are to Jesus. And the flip side of that is true then, right? That the worse we are at being good, the further we are from Jesus. And we're maybe even taught this, that if you are not good, then God will not bless your life. Haven't we been told that? If you're not good, then God will not bless your life. But then, we don't see reality match that. Because we see some people that are messed up driving Benzos. Like, here I am trying to be good, God. And, at that time, I'm driving my 2006 Chevy HHR where it leaks when it rains. You know what I mean? So then it creates this, like, well, what's the point of being good? What's the point of trying to be good? But that's the point. God isn't looking for good people. And his blessings for you is not based on how well you perform, or how good you are. It's not based upon that. It is based on something far greater than that, which is vitally important for us to understand. And so, with that in mind, then, it's important for us to look at, because performance is what we're driven by. I'll give you an example. Back in the 90s, there was this 4-phrase thing that we would do that would help us to perform. You already know where I'm going. That would help us to perform well. The initials are W what? JD. And they stood for what? What would Jesus do? Now, at the heart of that sounds good. The heart of that sounds good. Like, hey, let's do what Jesus would do. Let's act the way that Jesus would act. But again, it's still performance-based. So I could do what Jesus would do and still have a messed up heart. I could be kind in the way that Jesus could be kind and have a messed up heart. See, what if we changed what would Jesus do? What if we just simply changed the what to why? Why would Jesus do? Now, does that begin to change? Does it begin to look a little different? Why would Jesus do? And we know that Jesus is driven by love, correct? So what if we change it from WWJD to WWJL? Who would Jesus love? Why would Jesus love? Like, now we're starting to dig into something deeper there. Now it's not about performance, it's about heart, right? And so with that, it's important for us to begin to understand this, that what is it that drove Jesus? What is it that drove Jesus? And you can see that right on the screen. Jesus' guiding question was not, what is the right thing to do? But rather, what is the loving thing to do? Jesus' guiding question was not what is the right thing to do, but what is the loving thing to do? And I'll give you an example. So on Tuesday, I spent all day, because I usually I try to work on my sermons on Tuesdays, Wednesdays. But Tuesday, I spent all day looking for cars for Faith. So finally did. Faith has our first car, you guys. My youngest has our first car. So it's a really cute little 2013 Honda Civic. She actually drove herself to church today for the first time in her car. So really excited for her. But so that evening, though, when we got home, I was like, man, I need to start working on my sermon, because I knew Leah was leading worship today, and I wanted to try to get the sermon to her as soon as I could. So my goal was try to get it to her by Wednesday. But I knew my Wednesday was going to be packed, so I needed to start working on it. So I said to Heidi, because I have a difficult time working at home. I just get so easily distracted. And, something that should take me 2 hours takes me like 4 because I'm just distracted. So I said, I'm going to go to Starbucks and work on my sermon. And so I went to the local Starbucks and realized that they closed at 10. So I got there at 8. So I was like, good, I got from 8 to 10 to work on my sermon. So I got there, started working on my sermon, and then around 9:35, because I happened to look at my clock, I looked up and I realized I was the only one inside the lobby. Just me. I was the only one. Now, the right thing to do, because they were open till, exactly. So the right thing to do would have been stay there till 10 so I can get my sermon done. That's the right thing to do, so that way I can finish it, try to get as far as I could, in that time. Because also at that time, I have to tell you, I was on a roll. Like some ideas were coming, I was putting them down, and I stopped. I just kind of think about my next point where I was going, and that's when I kind of looked around and realized, because sometimes what I'll do is as I'm working, I'll stop, I'll look around, and as I look at people, and maybe I'll see things, those things will inspire some thought, and I'll continue to go. So I stopped, I looked around, and I realized, oh, I'm by myself. here at 9:35. But they close at 10. But then I started thinking about when I worked in retail. And when I worked in retail, what we would like to do is we would like to try to start the closing process as soon as possible so that way we could be out of there quickly, right? Nothing worse than a customer that comes in at 9:55 saying, I'm only going to be here for a couple of minutes because we know 9:55 means what? 10:15. We need to leave. Okay, I know you're closing, but and it just happens to be that I'm working on this part of the sermon. So what is a loving thing to do? And it was really interesting because I'm working on my sermon, and then, so I stopped and I kind of looked up, and some of the people that were working in the back kind of looked over and looked at me. Looked at me. And then I kind of looked down, and I looked up again, and they were looking, but it wasn't like, get out, no. It wasn't anything like, they weren't rude, they weren't disrespectful, but you know how it is, you just kind of look up like, oh, there's somebody still here. And so I just realized, like, you know what I'm going to do? The right thing to do is to stay and finish my sermon until 10 o'clock. But the loving thing to do is leave so they can start the closing process so they can get out as quickly as possible. Right? So that's the challenge is in learning what is the loving thing to do versus what is the right thing to do. What is the right thing? So, and I think sometimes in showing love, we end up doing the right thing. Because I think in doing that, it showed them, and it was really cute. As I walked out, I was like, see you guys, bye. And they were like, bye, see ya. They got so happy when it was time for me to go. And so with that in mind, I think it's good for us to begin to look at so again, the driving question is not what is the right thing to do. It is what is so what if we make that our mantra? What if we make that our mantra? Every day we ask ourselves, God, what is the loving thing to do? Show me that. Loving to you, loving to others, loving to myself. What is a loving thing to do? And then if we're beginning to practice love, guess what? If this is changing, we're cleaning, then the outside of the cup will be clean too. The outside. So with that in mind, then where does that flabbiness come in? Where does the cup have to be changed? Where does that come from? And as I was thinking about this sermon, there's a passage that came to mind. It's a passage that I read before, but it also opened my eyes to be able to see it differently. And so that's Genesis chapter 3, verse 10. So real quickly, Adam and Eve have blown it. They have blown it. They have messed up. So then they hear God walking through the garden. And so God says, where are you? And Adam replied, I heard you walking in the garden, so I was, because I was naked. So for the first time, out of the many times that maybe they had walked with God through the garden, for the first time, they hid. Why? Because they were disconnected from love. See, that's the thing about sin. That's the power of sin. The power of sin is not the wrong thing. The power of sin is that it disconnects you from love. And then there are fallouts of that disconnect from love. There's fallouts from that disconnect from love. But it's vital that we begin to understand that. So I think a lot of times we've heard it, like we are all born into sin. And a lot of times when people hear that, they think it means we are all born evil. But what if there's something a little bit deeper than that? What if we're all born disconnected from love? And don't we see the reality of that? I never had to teach my kids how to be selfish. That's a disconnect from love. My mom never ever had to say, Kenny, today I'm going to teach you how to lie. Ready? So when you tell a lie, the key to it is that you have to believe it. So you believe it so strongly till that lie becomes truth to you and you will be convincing as a liar. My mom never had to teach me how to lie. She had to teach me how to do what? Be honest and tell the truth. So I think it's important for us to realize, what if, instead of looking at it as we're born evil, what if we look at it as we are all born disconnected from love? And it is that disconnect from love that leads to evil, but we are all born disconnected from love. That's the ultimate cost of sin. That's the ultimate cost of sin. And as a result of that disconnection from love, that is what ultimately leads to death. But the beautiful thing of that is, if we become reconnected to love, then that ultimately leads to the door of eternal life. So although we may still die physically, we still spend eternity with Jesus. We spend eternity with the Father, with the Holy Spirit. We spend eternity with him. That's the beauty of that. So it's important for us to begin to dig into that. So that's the first aspect. I hid, and I hid because I was disconnected from love. He also said I was afraid, right? He also said I was afraid. It says in 1 John chapter 4, verse 18, such love has no fear, because perfect love expels all fear. Perfect love expels all fear. If we are afraid, it is for fear of punishment. And this shows that we have not fully experienced his perfect love. I was afraid. Why was I afraid? I was afraid that I was going to be punished. That's why I was afraid. And so when we begin to understand love, it doesn't mean that we don't recognize, like, there's a cost for not loving. There's a cost for the fallouts because of the acts that are not loving. We recognize, but we also know this, that because God is trying to reconnect me with his love, then I don't have to be afraid when I mess up. That I can go to God and say, you know what, God, I acted unloving. What I did was unloving. It was unloving to you. It was unloving to so-and-so. And also it was unloving to myself. I degraded myself by doing what it is that I did. So, Father, forgive me. And reconnect me. Continue to reconnect me with the love that you desire to have for me. Also, when you begin to understand that, that also changes your ability to apologize, doesn't it? I'm apologizing because what I did to you was unloving. It was unkind. I was impatient. We can begin to go through that list. So as we understand this, ultimately it really is a game changer. So the issue is not do or not do. That is the question. No, that is not the question. The issue is love or not love. Love or not love. And so this is why it's important for us to look at Jesus. Because we can look at Jesus and begin to say, wow, I should live the kind of life that Jesus lived. And do what Jesus did. And completely miss the boat. Or I can begin to dig further. And I begin to look at, the love that Jesus has. And we've talked about that over the course of this series. One of the reasons why Jesus Christ is so compassionate to us is because he sees the real us. The real us, not the broken us, not the faulty us, not the struggling us, not the messed up us. He sees the real us. That's what drove his compassion. That's what drove his willingness to sacrifice. That's what drove his willingness to give. That's what drove his willingness to be a servant. That's what drove his willingness to be so humble. Is because he saw the real us and loved the real us. And so what if we begin to practice that with other people as we begin to build love in our lives? So it's important for us to understand this, and you can see this right on the screen. Jesus did not just die and rise again to remove your sin. He died and rose again to restore your capacity to love. To restore your capacity to love. Because that is what makes us like Christ. It is the capacity to love. And so what if that love permeated in us? What if that love became a greater reality in us? What if that love changed us, moved us, and called us? What if that love built his presence in us? What if that became the ultimate mindset? So now this brings us back to our original question, and that's simply this. Do you know about Jesus, or do you know Jesus? Do you know about Jesus, or do you know Jesus? And my prayer is that we will begin to seek to become people who know him. And as a result of knowing him, like, Jesus, I want to know you. I want to know your love. I want to be filled and I want to be so filled with your love for me and your love in general that it changes everything that I do. It changes the way that I see. It changes my perspective. It changes maybe the way that I look at the guy that cuts me off on the freeway. It changes the way that I use that I look at that coworker who gossips about me in the office. It changes the way that I look at, this person I'm having conflict with. It changes. And I want to make this really clear. Practicing loving doesn't necessarily mean every conversation is butterflies, unicorns, and rainbows. Our next series that we're going to be starting is called Real Talk. It's next series we're starting next week. Real Talk, being able to love others through our conversation. That's what we're going to be looking at. And so sometimes practicing love means having tough conversations. I mean, do you think Jesus loved Peter when he said, "Hey, get behind me, Satan"? Like, oh, I've called people out, but I have never called anyone Satan. At least not yet. I haven't. Now, there's some people that I've gotten close to. No, joking. But as we look at this, it's so vital for us to begin to understand love changes everything. And so what I'm able to do is I'm still able to confront the issue, but realize I'm confronting the issue, but I'm talking to someone who's broken. And so as we're confronting the issue, we're also looking at ways to restore, reconnect, and heal, and rebuild, and refresh. We're looking at ways to be able to do that because we see how broken they really are. Just as the reality is when Jesus looked at us, Jesus saw the broken us and loved us anyway. That's so powerful. So what I want to do is just give us what is the greatest question that we could ask. And it is so simple. And you can see that question on the screen. That question is simply this. Am I becoming loving? Am I becoming loving? Am I becoming more loving? Just that. Am I becoming more loving? So again, one of the things that I've done is I've created these. These are in the back. And eventually I'm going to make these available on our website as well. But it's called a daily check-in. And it is based off of the idea of love up, love out, love in. And so it goes by daily, so Monday through Sunday. And what we can do is on the front it says, write down observations as you check in with God and yourself on a daily basis. So you're writing down your thoughts. Is there anything I would do differently? Where am I growing? But each day you're writing down, what did I show love up today? What did I love God today? Love out. What did I love someone else today? Love in. What did I love myself today? Now, some days you're going to fill in all three. Some days you might realize, oh, I didn't fill in much today. And the goal of this isn't to be driven by guilt, but the goal of it is to look at, hopefully as you're doing this practice, and the reality is if we want to become more loving, we do need to check in with ourselves. It doesn't just automatically happen. So as we're doing this, and hopefully what we're seeing is love will become a greater reality in our lives. So I would love to run out of these. They're in the back. You can grab one as you're walking out and leave, and you can have it there that you can daily kind of be able to do each week. Just being able to check in with yourself. And hopefully you'll begin to see those elements of your life changing and growing and developing as you become more loving. So again, here at Encounter, we finish every message, right, with love up, loving God, love out, loving others, and love in, loving yourself. And so based on this message, here's what we learned. In love up, accept God's invitation. Accept God's invitation to restore you to love. Accept God's invitation to restore you to love. Not make me better, not make me good, but to restore you to love. Restore you to love. How do I know if my love for God has been driven by love or by doing? Is it connected with fear? Because I'll tell you this. Here's a fear that I had in my life, is when I didn't perform well enough, I thought, am I kicked out? Like, have I lost my place in heaven? Because I deserve to be kicked out. Like, there's that whole mindset that kind of goes along with performance. But if we're building love, God built that love in me. And then love out. Develop the capacity to see others through the lens of love. Develop the capacity to see others through lens of love. And then love in. Live for more than being good. Be loving. Live for more than being good. Be loving.